Okay, right. I'm going to be British and talk loudly. You foreigners. Didn't we own you once? I don't know. No, somebody else. No, the other guys. I'm of course joking. My name is Mike Butcher. I'm a journalist, editor, roustabout of TechCrunch, and have been since the year 1850. And many of you might remember the wonderful computers we had back then. My God, they were noisy. And goodness me, the amount of coal they ate, incredible. Did you know the Britishman invented a computer? Charles Babbage, his name was. And the first computer programmer was the niece of Lord Byron. What was her name again? Lovelace. Ada Lovelace. She was a woman, everyone. The first engineer was a woman. Don't you forget it. Right. Now, we have a very strange title. Hello, Mr. Photographer Dan. Hello. He's by the way, Dan Taylor. He's the best photographer, event photographer in Europe. Hire him. He gives me 20% every time I say that. I'm kidding. This is a joke. There you go. No, it's actually it's cash in unmarked bills in a brown paper envelope. And a bag of Coke. Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're going to be talking about, and here's my timer. Oh my God, that's a long time. That's fast. We're running out half an hour late. We should
it's
cut
not
this.
Even moving.
We should cut. This timer's not working. Does it? Do you have time in Bulgaria? There's this new sort of concept called minutes and seconds. You really should get on the clue train. So, look, this title is the title of this chat is about being in love with startups. Well, that's what an appropriate topic of conversation with Roxanne Varza. But the question is not so much this, is that what we're going to be talking about much more, as Roxanne and I was chatting earlier, is the ecosystem. And one of the things about the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and startups and investors is that people don't pay attention to it often enough, or they pay the wrong kind of attention to the wrong kinds of things. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about how bad Microsoft is these days.
Ah, yes. The moment of Microsoft jokes.
I mean,
I'll wait.
Guys,
go for it.
You know, you guys really screwed up, right? I mean, Windows, what's going on?
Windows.
The last one?
Windows.
I actually had to buy a Windows PC the other day for a friend. Oh my God. It was infected within about 5 minutes. It was already a bot.
Well, the security stuff, I'm going to put aside.
It practically walked out. It practically walked out of the room and mugged an old lady, almost immediately.
Pretty strong computer.
Yeah.
No, actually, Microsoft going very well.
I'm being very unkind. I'm being very unkind.
But
you should probably actually explain to everyone what you actually do at Microsoft.
Yeah,
I'd like to know.
So Microsoft, I love it because every time we get a good minute of Microsoft jokes, I usually walk into them. So this was the first, I didn't have to do it. But at Microsoft, I run the startup programs for France. So we have BizSpark, which you guys have in Bulgaria. Hopefully you guys know about it. It's essentially providing our software, our cloud to startups for 3 years for free. You guys should all use it because if you're paying for licenses today, there's no point. And then we also have the Microsoft Ventures program, which is a lot more recent. So we have a network of 7 accelerators, China, India, Israel, France, Germany, UK, and in the US we're in Seattle. And we're essentially bringing in France, it's 10 startups that we work with for periods of 3 months. We do that twice per year, and we're essentially helping them raise money, build a product, starting with communication, clients. We're helping them essentially accelerate their business. And we're starting to work with later stage companies that are really starting to take off. So,
what's in it for my? Oh, by the way, I'm going to give you some advice. You should put
I
your
hate
microphone.
These. Yeah, no, I like
put
it
your
up
microphone
here.
down a bit more.
I love it, just like Madonna.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're gonna put it down.
Lady Gaga.
I always like eat these.
But is it okay? Just very quickly. Is it it's in your interest to do this so that the startups, companies end up using Microsoft products, right? Correct or not?
Of course, that's our end goal. We don't force anyone to use Microsoft products. So we have companies coming building iOS, Android,
What about
Amazon.
that AK-47 I saw the other day? And at yes, in your office.
No.
Oh.
No, we had no. But
Okay.
what we do is we put a generous
Wasn't
offer on the
loaded.
table, and we put technical support next to you for free, and it's hopefully hard to walk away from. So that's what we like to think.
I mean, honestly, I think you're probably. I mean, I think honestly, Microsoft should basically just sign you up or start cloning your DNA or something, because you appear to be the most famous person in technology in France at the moment. Several magazine. I don't think you've done a cover. Have you done any covers yet?
I haven't done a cover.
Okay,
Hit me where it hurts, Mike.
some editor out there should be fired. But definitely, you seem to be. But I mean, you've ended up with such a lot of attention. It's interesting actually to me, because about 5 or 6 years ago, I don't know. You look exactly the same. We had a drink in Paris, and I desperately tried to hire you to TechCrunch.
All right.
Will you tell the story?
I love this story. This story was, so I'm American, you guys can hear it. I moved out to France. It freaks people out. I left Palo Alto and I moved to France. You guys can deal with that. And I moved there for the startups.
And by the way, her French accent is so good that French people don't know she's not French, which is saying something.
I had to work on that. So I moved out to France, and I moved for the startups. People come up to me and they're like, you have a boyfriend in France, you moved to get married. I'm like, no, I like the ecosystem there. And so I started this blog because when I was in San Francisco, it used to annoy me. I used to work for the French investment agency. We would go to American companies and be like, open an office in France. And people in America, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, they'd look at me and they'd be like, French people are on strike, they're on vacation half the year, I'm not opening an office there. And the French people in Silicon Valley were even worse, because they were there being like, I tried to start a business, there's no funding, there's no startups. They were the ones actually making it a lot worse. And when I got to France, I'm like, actually, this place is great. Startup energy was just starting to pick up. I started a blog called Tech Baguette. My dad told me nobody would ever read it. And Mike...
I read it.
Mike happened to read it. And then we ended up in a bar, and I'll let you tell the story from there.
Well, I had a Kia Royale. I can't remember what you had.
I don't remember either.
And then I basically said, you've got to join TechCrunch. It's a really good blog. And you said, oh, well, I'll think about it. Check the diary. And then we hired you. Luckily, we managed to convince the rather irascible Michael Arrington, wherever you are. Mike, we love you. Don't worry. To hire you. And you did TechCrunch France for a couple of years, wasn't it?
It was about a year and a half, yeah.
About a year and a half, yeah. So basically you sort of got into ecosystem. I think the interesting thing is, this is a sort of a lesson to people, is that ecosystems do need media. And I know that's a self-serving thing to say, but media media creates noise, it creates interest, it creates attention. I mean, you must have ended up feeling that when you were doing TechCrunch France, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting, especially for foreign language speaking markets that don't speak English, I think you have to produce content in English. I think that's how investors learn about you, that's how clients learn about you. So I don't even see how people can operate internationally without putting that energy in it. And I think the media is very relevant. And what's even more interesting is I'm getting more and more VC funds. So they figured out that Andreessen and, I don't know, First Round, whoever's communicating well in the US, are doing a terrific job. It's helping their deal flow. They now want to become essentially a media. Like Index is essentially, they have like a media platform almost if you go to their website.
Index Ventures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the rise of venture capitalists on Twitter with sort of Benedict Evans and Mark Andreessen having huge followings, using those social channels as their media channels to draw attention to their companies, etc.
So I think that that's a key component in a growing ecosystem.
I mean, weirdly, I was actually in Minsk, Belarus, recently, and nobody knew what was going on there. And lo and behold, about a month later, somebody decided to launch an English language blog about startups in Belarus. So if they can do it, I think anybody can. But okay, let's talk about some tips that you've come across. I mean, you've seen the rise of. I mean, you were there right at the beginning when France really sort of took off. Got going again, as it were. I mean, I think probably your perspective would be that a lot of French technology companies are very sort of slow-moving and old-fashioned. And
oh, totally. No, actually, I'm maybe in terms of what Alice, if you guys heard what Alice was talking about with the family earlier, I have an American attitude about it. I think France has come a long way. I obviously don't think the ecosystem's perfect. I don't think any ecosystem is perfect. I think we can even criticize Silicon Valley maybe for their style and for a lot of other things. But in terms of where France is, when I came out a few years ago, we were having like the very first startup weekend event. And today we have ridiculous amount of like funds that are popping up left and right. The government's paying a lot of attention to things. I think that, I read recently that 35% of all the seed deals between 500K and 2 million in Europe are coming out of France. For a country where everyone's going, there's no investors, that's pretty good. Angel and exits are maybe our two areas that we should focus on.
Let's talk about investors in a sec. Let's come to those. How important do you think are events? You talk about Startup Weekend.
Yeah.
How do you?
Actually, big.
Was that a key driver? Do you think or not?
I think it brings people together. I think Startup Weekend even. People probably look at it now as an event that's like ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's getting that awareness out there, getting people to try stuff, bringing teams that could work together. So I think it's very relevant, and I think conferences like this as well. I would have probably not come to Bulgaria and ever met a Bulgarian startup otherwise. So this is how we get people kind of educated about what's happening.
Excuse me. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's go to the investment side of things. One of the things that's happened over the last couple of years in the UK has been you've had the government put in programs. They're called various things like Enterprise Investment Scheme and things like that. Effectively, it's to de-risk angels and small seed funds from the risk associated with investing in small early stage companies, many of them that will fail, of course. Has France gone down that path? Has France made it easier for angel investors to get involved? What would you say?
So France, we had a pigeon movement, obviously, when the current president came in.
What was that?
And that was essentially he wanted to put a very high tax in place for people that were making income of 1 million plus, so people that would potentially be good angel investors. And there was a lot of backlash, so the pigeons were the community of the entrepreneurs.
They called themselves the pigeons.
Les pigeons. So we had some backlash. They brought the tax down. It's still not it's not incredible. It's 60%, which is still very high. So I think that there's that that's a blocker, and today they're starting to pay attention to it. There was a strong incentive for the wealth tax before called ISF in France, similar to the scheme that you mentioned, but our cap was a lot lower. I think you guys have it at 1 million in the UK. Investment was around 500K. So you were seeing smaller amounts being put in. So there have been some of these schemes that have been so, and I think also the problem is that they're so volatile. You get a new president, they change it, that's not good for the ecosystem. But France, I don't 100% agree with that we shouldn't go after government initiatives, because France puts a lot of money into its public bank called BPI France. Of innovation, they're even backing funds. They're investors in a lot of France's big funds like Partech. So I think that's hugely relevant for the ecosystem.
I think it's salient that we should not forget that the internet wasn't originally a US military government project, basically, wasn't it? DARPANET, and then it became commercialized to some extent, but without that government funding, it wouldn't have got out off the ground in the first place. And France does have a very long history of that. Remember the Minitel? Well, you won't remember the Minitel, but other people might. And I'm far too young to remember the Minitel, of course. One of the big story that came out of France actually recently was the craziness around Dailymotion, about how Dailymotion wasn't going to be sold to Yahoo, and then it was sold to Orange, and then they couldn't sell it again to somebody else.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why doesn't the French government get with the program and go, listen, don't worry, it's a free market. We've heard of capitalism.
That one obviously was very disappointing to see, and I think that kind of threw a lot of investors off, because obviously the exits are what are encouraging people, and Yahoo, to have a French company acquired by Yahoo would have been huge for us. And so there's been a lot of back and forth on that.
What was the chatter that you heard about it? The people blowing their tops?
Yeah, I think the ecosystem was quite disappointed. And at the same time, from the government perspective, there was kind of that protectionist attitude of, well, it's our content and we want to be able to control that and we don't want Yahoo to buy it and shut it down. It's kind of our pride, which I also get. So, there's both
Why
those
the hell
sides.
would they shut it down?
I don't know. Google does shut down a lot of
Strange.
acquisitions. People shut down acquisitions. It happens. So, I think you also have to be kind of in sync with that.
I think that's a very pessimistic. You don't shut down a 100 million user video
I
platform
don't think they would have shut it down.
overnight. Hello, let's just destroy the value. But the, so government attitudes had a real effect on that. And we heard from Alice earlier about how kind of sclerotic and cancerous some of this sort of government involvement can be in the ecosystem if it's done in the wrong way. How, in your experience, and I think people probably might want to hear about this from your experiences, how important is it to lobby governments to put in the right kinds of legislation to allow for innovative companies to exist? Should we all sort of join a lobby organisation and go and lobby politicians? Or, politicians want jobs. That's one of the things about politicians, is that they just want everyone to be employed so they get re-elected. And the trouble with the technology industry is that it doesn't employ thousands of people, but it can create enormous amounts of value.
Yeah.
Is that the way you go into this, or?
So I think, obviously, as you said, they're interested in jobs, they're interested in investment. And I think the tech sector, even though people will say it's not the case and blah, 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 I think it's a huge job creator. And I don't think you can just look at the jobs at tech companies. I think you have to look. Now we have government officials that are dedicated to tech. We have media outlets that are dedicated to tech. So I don't think it should be so narrow as just like X company has made jobs. And I'm a strong believer that actually you should work with the government. I think the UK has done a terrific job because they are working really well with leaders in the tech space to kind of pilot some of those programs. And I think
they
those
don't just sort of magic them out of thin air. They go to the people who've done it and say,
they
what
put
should
them
we
in
do?
charge. They go, hey, you run a company, hey, do this. And I think also gov.uk was a great initiative that was essentially all the government services were rolled out like a startup product. I think there's a lot to be done in joining those two forces together, and I think France is now turning the page, but initially it was kind of government, and in France the education system is such that you go to a special school to work in government, and then you work in government, you never work in the private sector if you become a government official. So there was that
disconnect. And they're actually proud of that.
They're very proud of that, but they're realizing that it doesn't make any practical sense when you actually have to build something.
Especially in a globalized economy, I suppose, right? Yes. But you have some amazing entrepreneurs. Xavier Niel is working on a massive project in Paris. Do you think that's something that could be replicated? He's going to build a... You explain it and then...
So do you guys know who Xavier Niel is? Raise your hand if you've heard of Xavier Niel. Oh my goodness. So Xavier is on the French billionaires list. He's maybe, I think, 10th richest man in France, but he's also an incredible entrepreneur. He runs a telecoms company, so one of the 4 telecom operators in France called Free. And he has been a super active kind of person in the ecosystem. So have you heard of Kima Ventures? Raise your hand if you've not heard of it. You've totally heard of Kima Ventures. So they make 100 investments per year in the angel level. That's Xavier's fund. He's built a school in France called 42, where they are essentially providing free tech education. So people who want to learn how to code, it's free for 1,000 students per year. And then now he's working on building essentially what will be the world's biggest startup incubator called 1,000 Startups. It's 30,000 square meters, maybe it's more. And he's working on opening that in the next 2 years. So he's essentially, he's created an ecosystem within an ecosystem for himself. And I think really big, ambitious projects like that, like educating 1,000 developers, investing in 100 startups per year, and building the world's biggest incubator has really changed how people talk about the French ecosystem.
Do you think it's going to take somebody like that vision to do things, or can you do it on a more of a can you get multiple co-working and multiple accelerators going? And
I think you can.
Get the similar kind of effect going.
I think you can. I think you probably want to team up in cases like that, because I think the richness comes from being able to say, as a country, we have X that's the best. And I love to use the example, even though people will now say that maybe the UK startup visa isn't where it should be. But I think UK was leading in the world when they kind of came forward and said, we want to make the best startup visa.
Beat the US
yeah.
to it, yeah.
Which was incredible. And I think if you have an ambition that is so strong, and it can just be in one area, it doesn't have to be across the board.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you look at the Estonian government, for instance, and now it has this e-citizenship initiative where you pay something like $50 or something and you become an Estonian citizen. You can open an Estonian bank account, and they don't give you a passport, unfortunately, which would be quite handy. Well, I'm not sure how handy is an Estonian passport, but it's relatively handy. So that's. I mean, for a small country, that's quite a disruptive thing, isn't it? To do.
That's huge, and I think Estonia, in terms of what they've done in the e-space, everything that's digital. I mean, everybody, when they want to talk about European countries leading in digital, they mention Estonia. It's amazing. So I think just having one initiative like that they can really be proud of.
Well, I certainly know that the British government has stolen some of their ideas. Absolutely, yes. What about? What about intra-country cooperation? Should companies compete on their own merits and say, we've got a better visa, or we've got more investors, or whatever, or we've got a better pathway to Silicon Valley, or do you think that certainly, for instance, in Europe, do you think that they should cooperate more?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because obviously I've just kind of said everybody should pick something and try and be really good at it. At the same time, what I see is Europe is already super fragmented. You see initiatives like Tech City in the UK and La French Tech in France, and they're not really cooperating that well. You have Germany probably doing a lot of similar things too. And I just wish that some of these countries would coordinate a little bit more. And I think especially regional initiatives would be very, very strong as well.
Well, they're not going to, are they? They're never going to.
I think government
They all just want, the French guys want the startups to go to France, the Germans want them to go there. Actually, the Germans don't seem to take much notice, as far as I can
I think they're
tell.
still getting their good share of, who's going to Berlin and whatnot. So.
Yeah. Well, Berlin's poor but sexy, as they say. Okay. Let's talk. Speaking of which, let's talk more about the problems. You say you need more Series A and follow-on funding in France. Will you say that? Or what
yeah, I think Series A actually has probably panned out quite a fair bit. I think growth is still where France is putting. They're putting more effort into it. And actually, we had a couple of growth funds that have been announced. So Partech announced a growth fund earlier this year. And so I think that's really where, in terms of investment, we still have work to do. And then obviously, exits and business angels are still far too few.
What's your advice then to entrepreneurs who are looking for funding? They should just get on a plane and get out to wherever they can find the money, or try and convince the local property developer to not build that hotel and put it into startups?
No, I actually think there's a lot of money in France. Despite the fact that there may be still some gaps in the funding cycle, early stage funding is there. And I think a lot of people, especially crowdfunding platforms, you do have angels, even though we don't have the number of angels as in the UK or in the US. But we do have angels. So I think early stage, you're good. And I think when you get to growth, it's probably a European problem. I don't think it's specific to France. So I think that's something that maybe Europe as a whole should start participating in together.
And then technically, I suppose you can get to a point where really the money flies in on planes if you're that good.
I hope so.
Money seems to be does definitely move globally these days. The interesting thing about, also just slightly segueing, you've become very interested in, for obvious reasons, because you have Iranian heritage, you've started to travel to Iran and do some work there. Well, I mean, having seen how the technology scene grew in Paris and in France over the last 5 years or so, what's your impression of Iran?
So Iran has been super exciting. Just so you guys know, I have both passports, which are not supposed to coexist, but they do. So in Iran, we have...
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Woohoo!
We'll edit that out.
So when I went to Iran the first time, actually, I was really impressed, because these guys, if you think about it with the sanctions and everything, it's hard for people to wrap their head around it. for example, a lot of the softwares and things that for us it's normal. Integrate this API, download this software. It's not legal there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but they're not like, that's not something that they can go to and actually openly disclose to different customers and whatnot. And then in terms of funding, they don't obviously have a lot of foreign investors. And I was amazed because when I went there the first time, it actually didn't seem to be a problem for the ecosystem. They are still educating themselves on how to develop for iOS, Android, a lot of the businesses that they're developing.
Do you see a lot of smartphones in Iran?
Yeah, of course, of course. And you have, I was amazed.
Do they look like ours?
They look exact. They're the same. They're better. No, they import it. What do you want me to say?
Import.
No, but I was impressed also because they are replicating a lot of what they're seeing elsewhere. They have actually some English language blogs that have launched. They have accelerator programs there. They have Startup Weekend. They have FailCon. So they're taking essentially brands that they've seen elsewhere and they're plugging themselves in so that at least they'll be mentioned. You know, when people say we have Startup Weekend, now Iran will be mentioned as well. So I think this is really promising, and I'm seeing a lot of the businesses are actually, I mean, their economy, their digital economy isn't as developed, so they still have a lot of development to make in payments and e-commerce and things like that. So you do see a lot of businesses that maybe we started launching there 5 years ago. But it's very, very promising, and it's moving very, very quickly.
Well, I suppose that they're going to move far more rapidly than anyone moved earlier in our system, because now they've got so much more to go on, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think they're very good with connecting themselves. You know, a lot of Iranians live abroad and work in, you know, high-tech companies and funds and whatnot, and they want to give back, and they're reaching out to these people and saying, come show us what you can do. And that's been very helpful.
There is an odd movement in France, isn't there? They consider that all the French people should move back from wherever they are back to France as well. What's going on with that?
I don't know if this has been announced. It's probably, I think it's being announced next week. It's
Ooh, breaking news.
It's breaking news. It's breaking news.
Excuse me, I might have to go and write something.
Yeah, it's an initiative that's being launched by several high-profile entrepreneurs in France, including founders of BlaBlaCar, Showroom Privé, companies like that. They want to reach out to the French entrepreneurs that have left France. So this was also part of the Pigeon movement, was a lot of entrepreneurs that were going to be facing that high tax left. So they want to reach out to these guys and say, hey, come back home, give back to the ecosystem. And I have really mixed feelings with this. I think...
You don't want them to come back?
Let them stay. No, I can stay here. They can stay where they want. No, I think it's very weird. France has a strange obsession with keeping the French in France, but not necessarily attracting foreigners to France. And I think if you do something, or if you develop an ecosystem that's so strong, you'll just attract the best people for whatever you're proposing. And I think they should focus more on that rather than trying to keep people.
Certainly from my perspective, I've seen the richest technology startup ecosystems have been developed where you get this lovely mix of locals, internationals, people who are expatriates who come and stay and live, people who come in and out of the country. You get that sort of rich mix going on, rather than, you know, it being homogenous in all one culture.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. And actually, surprisingly enough, we do actually have a lot of foreign entrepreneurs in France. We have a lot that come from North Africa, other European countries. We have some from India, a couple from the US. Robin Chase, who founded Zipcar, founded her second company in France. I think that it's really interesting because people don't always want to flaunt that. It's almost like try to blend in. And so I think actually it'd be nice to kind of celebrate those differences and encourage more of that.
Well, thank you, Roxanne. I mean, my final question is really, I mean, how do we clone you around Europe? So everyone gets their own Roxanne to become the big evangelist for the scene.
I don't think you want to, but no? I think you have tons of great people.
We might grab a slice of your hair later and see if we can DNA reproduce.
Take all the hair you want.
Reproduce.
No, actually, Mike, this has been super awkward because usually I moderate.
Oh, really?
So I'm hoping you're okay with this, but what's been going on at TechCrunch?
Well,
Alexia
it's been lovely to talk to you. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you. See you later, everyone. Well, no, we did get we've been in the news lately. I don't like doing this. We've been in the news lately. We've been bought by a company beginning with V. Was it Virgin or something?
I think it was Virgin.
Virgin?
Must have been Virgin.
Okay.
It was Varza. It was Varza.
Varza! Varza Con or something. Yeah, so well, I mean, you know, I, for one, welcome our new dark overlords.
Love it.
I think we need to go.
I have 2 more questions. You can't get out that easily.
What?
Don't you have some
No.
kind of event coming up?
Oh, yes. Right. Okay. I'm the worst person in the world at this. I'm doing a thing in June 16th. It's called the Europas. The Europas.
Do we have any Bulgarians going or nominated, or we have 1 Bulgarian going?
We have a judge right here, and that's all about getting interesting people together. It's invitation only. So basically, you have to apply and fill out a form, and we'll find out if you're interesting or not. And then we send you a ticket. Send you an opportunity to buy a ticket. And then you get to go and rub shoulders with the beautiful people, like yourself, of course. But no, we're just trying to create a very, very small, only a couple of 100 people event where some very interesting people get together, sort of basically work out how to take over the world, rule national governments, that kind of thing. It's sort of, I think, the Illuminati. The Illuminati for tech. And anyway, it's called the Europas.com, the Europas, and it's just one daytime conference and then a big award ceremony. We basically come through a process where we can figure out some of the best startups in Europe, celebrate, but it's a celebratory thing. And we're doing some stuff with some early stage founders as well. But so, yeah, I'm absolutely the worst. But I'm such a bad advertiser.
June 16th, London.
Yes, thank you.
That's it. And before you go, because I see you get pitched at startup events, and I wonder, I used to get the same thing, but I don't think anywhere near as bad as you.
Yes.
I want to know, like, you guys should all listen. What is, like, the most annoying or obnoxious thing that someone has done to get your attention?
Crawling under the stall in the toilet was interesting. Like shoving pitches under the stall. Like, here, please take my card.
Oh my
like
God.
this. I'm like,
That's not true, is it?
yeah.
That's true.
Yes, that's true.
What else? What else have people done to get your attention? I'm assuming they should do this again. Did that work? Did you
No,
okay.
no, that didn't work. No. What the fuck? Pitching me at the urinal while I'm trying to take a piss. Pitching me while I'm quietly sitting at the pub trying to get some downtime.
So what's like one piece of advice that we can give everybody before we get off stage?
Just be human. Just realize the situation is probably not appropriate at this moment in time to sell your company.
Great.
And interrupt. The other one I really hate is interrupting conversations. I'm having a conversation with somebody, and somebody comes up and goes, "Hey, blah blah blah," and they start pitching. I'm just trying to have a conversation. They say, "I'll be around. Just relax." So just be human. Don't be a robot. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Roxanne, Varza.